Well, good morning. Let's get started. We have a few strays still down there at the registration table, but I'm sure they'll be guided up this way by our able and very capable staff. I am McCaslin, the chair of the Department of History, University of North Texas, and welcome to our History Symposium. Making the 5th in a row. More importantly, it's the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. We're in the midst of it right now, so we're kind of sticking with the Civil War theme. Today we'll have my talk from 10 to 11. I'll give you 30 minutes to beat me up. Fine. 11:30 to 1, there'll be a lunch break. Randy White's barbecue will be catered, and at 1 o'clock, Dr. Clark, there you are, will speak on the great hanging from his perspective as a descendant of one of those who was hanged in Gainesville. We'll also allow you to be questioning him, be nicer to him. Then we'll give you time to buy books, souvenirs, chat with us out in the hall privately, whatever you might want to do. Now, I do have to give you a little heads up. I'm not sure what the impact is going to be, but apparently there is a competing event at 1 o'clock. You may have noticed there's a large box out there with a green drape over it with strange questions on the card. Apparently there's a big dead fish in there. It's a 130-million-year-old fish. It's a fossil fish, and somehow the powers that be that schedule these things scheduled a grand opening for the fish at 1 o'clock today. So we may be joined by some new faces at 1 o'clock. And if you want to, a new audience. And I'm sure you'd be welcome to go and stare at the fish if you want to. We've already been pulling up the cloth and peeking to be cheap. That's what historians do, right? We're incredibly nosy people. Don't ever leave something out that you don't want somebody to look at it, because we're going to go look at it. We're going to talk about it. The topic for this time is the great hanging in Gainesville, Texas. I'll do my own introduction very quickly, though. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and probably I don't need to do much of an introduction. I went to the University of Texas at Austin for my PhD, where I encountered this subject for the first time, thanks to my lovely wife who's fixing to take me off by taking my picture. It became a book called Tainted Breeze. I left there to go work in Tennessee and then over in North Carolina, always trying to make my way back, and found with the help of good friends such as my friend Mike Campbell, historian of the TSHA, right up here. He's sitting close to Kent Calder, the heart and soul, I guess you call it, of the TSHA, keeping it up and running. We're very proud to have it here and helping us with everything that we do. But he managed to convince me to apply for, I think it was the 3rd time that he talked me into applying and getting my job here and coming back here where I really wanted to be working on Texas history. Published a lot of books. There's some out here on the table. Please buy them for your friends, your family, anybody else. Christmas is coming, I promise. Put them in the closet. They'll be there. There we go. So I did go to UT Austin, not a Texan, in case that's something you want to figure out about me very quickly. I've written a lot on the Civil War, and I'm now chair of the Department of History, University of North Texas. My dream job. I'm finally back here. This is where I wanted to be. Now, first question I always deal with an audience. Why look at the great hanging at all? There are many people through the years who would rather deal with it by not looking at it. My argument backs all the way out to the simple fact of why do we do history at all? I do history because I want to know more about myself. I think that people are better off if you know more about yourself, if you're more aware of yourself, where you came from, how you came to be, who you are, and all the events that go into making up who and what you have become. That's no different than the great hanging in Gainesville, Texas. Now, why not leave it in the midst of popular memory, popular lore? Let those who want to to talk about it, and let the rest of us go. That is an argument to be made today. There's a big debate in history fields about popular memory or memory versus history. Somewhere along the way, my mentors taught me, I swear I think I got it all the way back from my relatives when I was a small kid, but you always try to find the truth. If you're going to act upon something, if you're going to believe something, if you're going to take it and make it part of you, then you have to the best of your ability, know what really happened or know what it really is. So, for the Civil War, for Texas, and for the Great Hanging, there are many myths. There are many ways of dealing with it. Just talking this morning with several of you out here on the tiles out here, the stories you tell me about the way the families dealt with this event, the stories they told, sometimes masking stories, very often embellishing stories, or sometimes just stories of dismissal. Didn't happen, wasn't going to happen. I had the same thing in my family history. Not to digress too far, but I had two relatives who left Sandersville, Georgia to fight in the Confederate Army on the same day in the same company, same regiment from a small town in Georgia. One of them was my great-great-grandfather, whom my great-aunt and all of her relatives would talk a lot about. They were very proud of him. On the same day, there was a fellow, same last name, same town, who was actually my great-great-grandfather's nephew. When I would ask, well, what about him? He never existed. No such person. So, we all have it in our families, right? I imagine Patrick Henry Swint, who was apparently the black sheep, must have had some horrible secret. And as a historian, I'm dying to know what it was. Okay, I'll figure it out. But these are the ways we deal with the past. This is not the way a historian is supposed to deal with the past, though, right? We don't accept memory. We don't accept the myths. We take the myths, we dissect them, we pull them apart, we go look at the records, we maybe talk to people who were there, if they're still alive, we read the newspapers, we do our best to get down to what really happened. Because that's the only way we can really fully know what it was all about and how that relates to us today. Does the Great Hanging relate to us today? Yes. We're going to talk about how they lived on a pressure cooker. Fears that were very real and fears that may not have been so real, but we do the same thing today, don't we? I'm not going to target different events. I'm not going to try to make this an argument over modern politics. We can do that later out there on the tiles. That'll be fine. It'll amuse me. But if we take it apart, we will begin to figure out that, wow, these people weren't so very different than we are. In fact, as a historian, I would argue they're not any different than we are at all. They dealt with things in the atmosphere with the information they thought they best had. My book says, and I will state again, they did not make the best decision possible. There were neighbors who made different decisions, and we can talk about that, faced with the same situation. And that is a large part of the tragedy of something like the Great Hanging, which does remain the largest mass hanging in U.S. history. And because it's such a tragedy, it's something we do need to remember, so that wherever faced with similar situations, we don't make the same sorts of mistakes, I hope. I am not going to talk about something as trite and cute as the lessons of history or anything like that. It's just something we need to keep in mind if we're faced with some of the situations that we will be in the turbulent world that we live in today. Always make me turn around and think about how that's going to look to our descendants 100, 150 years from now. Okay, what is the Great Hanging at Gainesville, Texas? Listen up. Come on. Me and technology do not get along. It hates me. There we go. It's a lovely picture, isn't it? It's not accurate. Here's part of the myth starting to grow. But this is what people saw over their breakfast in February of 1864 if they had a subscription to Frank Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. They flipped it open and it's like, oh my God, those Texans are crazy. This was based upon an account from a fellow, Frederick Sumner, who had escaped from Sherman, Texas, escaped Confederate authorities, made his way to Little Rock and on to the north, sat down with a New York reporter, told his side of the story, which he was not actually an eyewitness to this at all. And an artist sat down and worked this out. It's a very effective picture, isn't it? In fact, if you look closely, you can see some of the little tongues are hanging out. I mean, would you run this in a local paper today? I don't think so. But you know, we're in the midst of a war, and you wanted to convince the world that your enemy was a bunch of barbarians. So that's what this ran under the title of Rebel Barbarities in Texas. What had really happened? What had happened is this. On October the 1st, 1862, the local militia mustered at Gainesville in Cook County. Everybody who did not show up for the muster that day became suspect and a target. They were suspected of what? Of being a member of a peace party conspiracy that local authorities thought they had uncovered. What was the object of this peace party conspiracy? Well, it ranged from the mundane object of dodging the Confederate draft and avoiding paying Confederate taxes for a war effort you did not support, to rumors, based upon some brags by a few members, that they had connection with Union forces in Kansas, and that Union forces in Kansas were going to push their way through the Indian Territory, unite with Unionists in North Texas, and take North Texas out of the war, a la West Virginia, which many of you know by 1863 will have been broken off from the state of Virginia to be a separate state. That was the rumors. And anybody who didn't show up for that muster that morning, he was considered to be part of that conspiracy. With that information then, the leaders of the local militia, plus over the next couple of weeks, about 3 Confederate cavalry companies that came in for short periods to assist, rounded up about 150 prisoners, put them in a log pen store on the square in Gainesville. A meeting was held in the center of town. A court was assembled under the authority or sworn in by the county judge, R.G. Piper, and they, in a series of events, convicted and hanged 40 people in batches of 7, 14, and 19. 2 more were shot. Tales still persist that there were others who died in the pursuit of bringing in these prisoners. We do not know how many there. So that by the time it's over, the authorities in Cook County had executed in their makeshift court 40 people. After that, of course, the chaos spreads pretty rapidly. Confederate authorities, accepting that they had a problem in this area, set up a special unit called the Border Regiment to kind of keep peace, provide security, and other ugly events will happen throughout the end of the war. Did it become news? Yes, it flashed all the way across the Confederacy. Northern newspapers picked this up. By February of 1864, which is what, almost a year and a half later, it becomes this, a centerfold in Frank Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. After the war, we'll talk about, not much will be done, and this will kind of slide into the mists of myth and popular memory. There will be those who try to stop that slide. We'll talk briefly about them and what the context of that might be. But that in a nutshell is the Great Hanging. Confederate authorities reacting against the threat after a short investigation did assemble a vigilante makeshift court that hanged 40 people and shot 2 more, we know, in Gainesville, Texas. Did it happen in other towns? Yes, but not nearly to the size of Gainesville. And that's why Gainesville is most closely identified with the hangings. All kinds of questions arise, right? Why did they do this? How would they do this to their own neighbors? Because this isn't outsiders coming in. This is neighbor hanging neighbor. What went wrong? Why didn't they take other options? How does it grow from hanging 7 men, like I told you, to hanging 40? And why didn't somebody do something about it? If they knew, which they did, the world did not ignore this, why didn't they do something about it? Or if they did do something, what was the result? And then, of course, where does the story stand?